Climb inside this cramped steel coffin. Feel the weight of 45 tons pressing down through narrow treads. Your hands grip controls that respond like molasses in winter. The engine roars behind you, a temperamental beast that could die at any moment. Welcome to the Panther, Germany's so-called superior tank. The same machine that broke down more often than it fought. The same vehicle that spent more time in repair shops than on battlefields. What Allied tankers discovered inside these captured German marvels would shatter every assumption about tank warfare and change how we understand one of history's greatest engineering debates. December 1944. The snow-covered forests of the Ardennes. American tank crews huddled in their Shermans, watching German armor pour through the mist. Panthers, the sleek predators of the battlefield. 45 tons of sloped armor and a 75mm high-velocity gun. On paper, the Panthers should have been unstoppable. On paper, every engagement should have been a slaughter. And yet, the Americans had a secret advantage they didn't fully realize. Reliability, numbers, and ingenuity under fire. Inside the Sherman, the crew felt cramped but capable. The engine's roar was steady, predictable. Unlike the German counterparts that often coughed, stalled, or seized under stress. Tracks stayed on. Guns fired without misfires. Parts were standardized, easy to replace even in frozen field conditions. Mechanics could work wonders in hours, keeping tanks moving across Europe's brutal terrain. American tankers quickly realized that technical superiority wasn't everything. Survivability, mobility, and the ability to maintain combat power mattered just as much, if not more. By the first night of the Ardennes offensive, countless Shermans had already pushed Panthers off course, flanked them through dense forests, and survived hits that would have permanently disabled German vehicles. Every breakdown, every abandoned tank, every mechanical failure told a story. The Panther, for all its engineering brilliance, was a machine designed for perfection, not endurance. And in the real world of combat, endurance wins wars. The Ardennes winter of 1944 was unforgiving. Snow blanketed the forests, turning roads into treacherous rivers of ice and mud. For American tankers, every movement required calculation, patience, and an unshakable trust in their vehicles. The Sherman tank, derided by some as a death trap because of its lighter armor and smaller gun compared to German Panthers and Tigers, was about to show why the U.S. Army relied on it so heavily. On paper, it seemed outclassed, but the reality of warfare demanded more than statistics and engineering diagrams. Sherman tanks were not the heaviest, nor the most powerful, but they were reliable, numerous, and adaptable. Every component had been designed for quick repair, and American supply lines were structured to keep these machines operational even in the worst conditions. Field crews could replace engines, tracks, and transmissions in hours. Parts were standardized, unlike German armor, which required highly trained technicians and special facilities to keep running. In the snowbound Ardennes, the difference between mobility and immobility could decide whether a battalion survived or was annihilated. Panther tanks, by contrast, were marvels of German engineering. Sloped armor made them nearly impervious to the Sherman's 75mm guns. The high-velocity 75mm cannon could penetrate the Sherman at hundreds of yards. On paper, each Panther should have been an unstoppable predator. In practice, the tank was a delicate giant. Engines overheated easily, transmissions jammed, and the suspension was prone to catastrophic failure in rough terrain. A Panther lost to mechanical issues was just as useless as one destroyed by enemy fire, sometimes even more frustrating because recovery was difficult, slow, and dangerous under fire. American crews quickly learned to exploit the Panther's weaknesses. Flanking maneuvers, coordinated attacks, and the use of terrain became essential. Dense forests, muddy fields, and narrow roads limited the Panther's ability to bring its superior gun to bear. Meanwhile, Shermans could keep moving, retreat if necessary, and return to the fight after minor damage. The U.S. Army trained crews to think in terms of mobility and attrition, not just firepower. A Sherman might be outgunned, but 5 Shermans working together could neutralize a Panther by hitting weak points, avoiding frontal armor, and staying operational. Allied intelligence gathered from captured Panthers revealed another critical factor. German maintenance practices were unsustainable on a wide front. Factory-trained crews were often needed to fix major problems, and spare parts were scarce. The logistical nightmare compounded under the constant pressure of advancing Allied forces. Meanwhile, the Sherman, with its simpler systems and massive production numbers, could be replaced or repaired in days. In the chaos of war, reliability trumped raw power every time. By the end of December 1944, American tankers understood a harsh truth. The death-trap Sherman was not just a tank. It was a philosophy of war. Survival, mobility, and numbers mattered more than the finest engineering on paper. German Panthers, though technically superior, were often stranded, abandoned, or destroyed by minor tactical mistakes. For Sherman crews, each battle reinforced a lesson. Engineering brilliance is useless without practicality, adaptability, and support. The battlefield, not the blueprint, would determine the victor. The snow and mud of the Ardennes were more than just obstacles. They were silent allies to American tank crews. The Panther, with all its advanced engineering, struggled in these conditions. Its wide, heavy tracks were excellent on firm ground, but narrow, muddy forest paths quickly turned it into a lumbering, vulnerable target. Mechanical failures compounded the problem. Engines overheated, transmissions failed, and suspension systems, designed for smooth German roads, groaned under the relentless stress of uneven terrain. What appeared on paper as a nearly invincible tank was, in reality, fragile in the chaos of combat. Sherman crews, by contrast, had learned to embrace flexibility. Their tanks were lighter, easier to maneuver, and far less likely to suffer a catastrophic failure. Even if a Sherman took a hit from a Panther's 75mm gun, it could often remain operational long enough for the crew to execute a retreat or reposition for a counterattack. Mechanics could replace damaged parts in the field, and spare Shermans were never far behind. In the Ardennes, this combination of mobility, maintainability, and tactical doctrine proved more valuable than superior armor or firepower alone. Engagements during the Battle of the Bulge highlight this stark contrast. Panther crews often became stranded on narrow roads, their heavy vehicles bogged down in mud or blocked by fallen trees. Sherman units, exploiting these weaknesses, could flank and isolate their opponents. The American tanks didn't need to match the Panther shot for shot. Instead, tank commanders relied on maneuver, teamwork, and quick thinking to outsmart the enemy. A single Sherman could bait a Panther into overextending, only to have another Sherman or a coordinated squad strike from the side. Over time, these small tactical victories accumulated, allowing U.S. armored units to maintain momentum despite facing technically superior machines. American tankers also discovered the psychological edge. Crews trusted the Sherman because it rarely broke down, even under extreme conditions. Confidence in the tank's reliability allowed soldiers to take risks that would have been impossible in a Panther. The Germans, conversely, were constantly aware of their vehicle's fragility. The Panther's reputation as a superior tank was undermined by its unpredictability. Breakdowns were common, and even a fully intact tank could become a liability if it needed extensive repairs far from a depot. By the end of these early skirmishes, a critical lesson emerged. Numbers, reliability, and tactical doctrine could overcome technological superiority. The Sherman might not have had the thickest armor or the most powerful gun, but it could stay in the fight, and its crews could act with confidence. German tanks, for all their engineering brilliance, were often immobile, isolated, and vulnerable to coordinated attacks. It was a turning point in how tank warfare was understood. Allied commanders began to see that battlefield success depended less on the theoretical superiority of a vehicle, and more on its ability to survive, maneuver, and be supported. In Normandy and the Ardennes, the Sherman proved it could do all of these things consistently, and sometimes, that was enough to defeat the superior Panther. The Ardennes winter was testing more than just tank engineering. It was testing strategy, leadership, and the endurance of men. The Panther, though imposing on paper, revealed its weaknesses under the harsh reality of frontline conditions. Engine failures were rampant, and its heavy armor, while theoretically invulnerable to the Sherman's 75mm gun, could not protect against coordinated attacks. A Panther isolated from support was a sitting target, and the German supply lines struggled to deliver spare parts under constant Allied air and artillery pressure. The Sherman, lighter and more reliable, could be repaired in the field and redeployed in hours, giving American forces a crucial edge. Sherman crews quickly adapted their tactics. They learned to avoid head-on engagements with Panthers whenever possible. Instead, they utilized speed, maneuverability, and teamwork. Coordinated attacks allowed multiple Shermans to strike weak points, flanks, rear armor, or turret joints, while keeping the enemy off balance. Even when outgunned, the mobility of the Sherman made it possible to retreat, regroup, and strike again. Panther crews, by contrast, often had to fight or retreat slowly, hampered by mechanical fragility and terrain challenges. Field reports from tank commanders emphasized a growing realization. Mechanical reliability and numbers often outweighed raw firepower. A single Panther might destroy one Sherman, But the logistics required to repair or replace a Panther outstripped what the Germans could manage. Sherman units, backed by robust American supply chains and maintenance crews, could replace losses quickly, keeping the pressure constant on German armored units. Even minor skirmishes, if repeated over days, could erode German operational effectiveness. The psychological impact on crews cannot be overstated. American tankers trusted their machines. Confidence in the Sherman's reliability allowed daring maneuvers that would have been unthinkable in a mechanically unpredictable Panther. They could traverse narrow roads, icy slopes, and forested terrain without the constant fear of breakdowns. This trust translated into aggressive, flexible, and innovative battlefield tactics. By contrast, German crews often feared that their vehicles would fail before the enemy could. An illustrative engagement occurred during the early days of the Battle of the Bulge. Sherman units faced a small Panther detachment attempting to block a crucial road. The Americans avoided direct confrontation, instead flanking through the forest and coordinating with infantry and artillery. One Sherman squad, despite being outnumbered, successfully isolated and disabled two Panthers by targeting rear armor and exploiting the terrain. The remaining Panthers, unable to maneuver freely due to ice and snow, were eventually abandoned by their crews. The operation underscored a critical lesson. Mobility, coordination, and reliability could nullify technological superiority. By the close of these early engagements, American tankers and commanders had begun to reshape their understanding of armored warfare. The Sherman, despite its nickname as a death trap, demonstrated that a reliable, maneuverable, and maintainable tank could achieve what a technically superior but fragile machine could not: consistent battlefield effectiveness under harsh conditions. By the winter of 1944, American tankers had learned one of the most crucial lessons of armored warfare. Numbers and reliability could outweigh raw power. The Sherman, lighter and simpler than the Panther, was a machine designed for endurance and field serviceability rather than perfection. It was easy to repair, easy to move, and could be replaced quickly if destroyed. Panthers, for all their technological sophistication, were fragile in practice. Broken-down Panthers littered the roads of the Ardennes, their engines seized or their transmissions locked up under the stress of rough terrain and extended combat. The contrast became painfully clear in early skirmishes. Sherman crews were able to repair and return to battle after minor hits that would have sidelined a Panther indefinitely. Field mechanics worked tirelessly, replacing engines, repairing tracks, and restoring guns with a speed that German crews could rarely match. This difference allowed American units to maintain pressure on enemy positions without losing operational tempo. Panthers might win individual duels, but the relentless advance of Shermans, backed by artillery, infantry, and air support, began to tell a different story. One engagement during the Ardennes offensive highlights the Shermans' unexpected advantages. A squadron of 6 Shermans encountered a pair of Panthers attempting to block a vital supply road. The American crews avoided head-on confrontation, instead using terrain to flank the Germans. Snow-covered forests limited the Panthers' mobility, forcing them to fight from static positions. The Shermans circled, fired, and retreated when necessary, exploiting weak points in the German armor and the limitations imposed by ice and mud. Within hours, both Panthers were disabled or abandoned, and the road was open for Allied supplies. The lesson was unmistakable. Tactical skill and reliable machinery could overcome technical superiority. Sherman crews also benefited from psychological advantages. Confidence in their tanks allowed them to take risks, maneuver creatively, and maintain cohesion under fire. German crews, aware of their vehicles' mechanical fragility, often hesitated or made mistakes under stress. The Panther, brilliant in design but delicate in practice, demanded perfection. In a real-world battlefield scenario, perfection was impossible. The Shermans, imperfect but dependable, were able to keep fighting where the Panthers failed. American commanders began to adapt doctrine to reflect this reality. They emphasized mobility, coordination, and combined arms tactics over one-on-one tank duels. Shermans could be replaced quickly, allowing continuous pressure on the enemy. Panthers, while individually stronger, could not be replaced at the same rate, and mechanical failures often removed them from combat before they could make a decisive impact. By the end of December 1944, it was clear that the Sherman's combination of reliability, maneuverability, and tactical support had transformed it from a tank mocked as a death trap into one that sustained the Allied advance and proved indispensable. The battlefield lesson was simple but profound. Durable, adaptable machines with support and numbers would always triumph over fragile technical superiority. As winter deepened in the Ardennes, The stark differences between Sherman and Panther performance became even more apparent. The terrain itself played a silent but pivotal role in the unfolding drama. Snow, ice, and mud slowed even the most powerful German tanks. Panthers, weighing 45 tons and designed for relatively smooth European roads, struggled to maintain speed on narrow, frozen forest paths. Any misstep could lead to immobilization, forcing crews to abandon the vehicle or risk a catastrophic mechanical failure. Meanwhile, the Sherman, lighter and more maneuverable, was able to navigate treacherous conditions, allowing its crews to seize tactical advantages even in the most punishing weather. The practical reliability of the Sherman gave American tankers confidence to push forward relentlessly, often outmaneuvering German forces that had better firepower on paper. Field repairs were a cornerstone of this advantage. Sherman mechanics could work on engines, transmissions, and track assemblies under difficult conditions, sometimes repairing a damaged tank within hours. Panther repairs, in contrast, required specialized tools, replacement parts, and skilled technicians, none of which were readily available in the field. The result was a growing disparity between theory and reality. A technically superior tank could not always dominate when it was frequently broken or abandoned. Engagements during this period revealed the Sherman's adaptability as a force multiplier. Crews learned to employ flanking maneuvers, ambush tactics, and combined arms strategies that allowed them to exploit the Panther's weaknesses. A squad of Shermans could harass and disable Panthers by targeting side armor, tracks, or vulnerable rear sections. The Panther's superior frontal armor was less significant when it could not bring its gun to bear, or when it became stuck in mud, ice, or snowdrifts. In multiple encounters, smaller Sherman units successfully neutralized Panthers through coordinated teamwork, mobility, and patience, highlighting that real-world effectiveness depended more on tactics and logistics than on raw technical specifications. The psychological dimension also played a critical role. Sherman crews trusted their machines implicitly. Confidence in their tanks' reliability allowed crews to take risks, maintain initiative, and execute complex maneuvers that would have been impossible in a mechanically unreliable vehicle. Panthers, conversely, imposed constant stress on their crews. Every mechanical complaint or minor malfunction threatened mission failure, forcing German crews to act cautiously and sometimes hesitate at critical moments. In the chaos of combat, hesitation could be deadly. Commanders quickly recognized the strategic implications. The Sherman's ability to maintain operational tempo, even under heavy fire and harsh weather, meant Allied forces could sustain pressure on German positions, steadily eroding enemy defenses. Panthers, despite superior armor and armament, could not match this operational endurance. The lesson was undeniable. Battlefield effectiveness relied on a combination of reliability, numbers, adaptability, and support, not just superior engineering. By the midpoint of the Ardennes offensive, the narrative had shifted. The Sherman, once derided as a death trap, had become the backbone of American armored warfare. Its success was not due to firepower alone, but to consistent performance, rapid repairs, tactical flexibility, and the courage of its crews. The Panther, brilliant but fragile, often found itself outmatched not in a duel of guns, but in a war of attrition and practicality. The lessons learned by American tankers in the Ardennes went beyond technical comparisons between Sherman and Panther. It became increasingly clear that crew training, coordination, and adaptability were just as vital as the tanks themselves. Sherman crews trained for rapid repairs, mobility maneuvers, and combined arms coordination. Every driver, gunner, and loader understood their tank's limitations and strengths, creating a level of cohesion that often outmatched the mechanical superiority of the Panther. One notable engagement illustrates this perfectly. A platoon of Shermans encountered a small force of Panthers attempting to block a strategic road. Rather than engaging directly, the Sherman crews utilized the terrain, splitting into multiple groups to encircle the German tanks. One squad drew fire while the others flanked, exploiting weak points in side and rear armor. The Panthers' heavier frontal armor, their greatest strength in a head-on confrontation, became irrelevant in this maneuver. Within a matter of hours, both Panthers were disabled or abandoned, and the road was open for Allied logistics. This demonstrated a critical principle. Superior firepower without flexibility or tactical coordination was often insufficient. Reliability remained another defining factor. Shermans could take multiple hits, suffer track damage, or even lose a gun temporarily and still remain functional in combat. Panther crews, on the other hand, frequently found themselves stranded due to engine or transmission failure. Even a single immobilized Panther could not contribute effectively to the battle. representing both a tactical and psychological setback. The disparity between theoretical superiority and practical battlefield utility became increasingly stark. Furthermore, supply chains amplified the Sherman's advantage. The U.S. Army designed a system capable of keeping Shermans operational across hundreds of miles of damaged terrain. Replacement parts were abundant, mechanics were highly trained, and damaged tanks could be rotated out and repaired in the rear within days. German logistics, in contrast, were stretched thin. The Panthers' complex engineering made field repairs slow and difficult, while spare parts were limited and often delayed by Allied air attacks. The Sherman's simplicity and standardization allowed sustained pressure on enemy positions in ways that Panthers could not replicate. The cumulative effect of these factors began to reshape Allied doctrine. Commanders recognized that reliability, maneuverability, and crew cohesion were just as important as armor and firepower. The Sherman's success was not due to raw technical specifications, but to a combination of practical engineering, disciplined crews, and adaptable tactics. It became a machine perfectly suited to the operational philosophy of the U.S. Army. Maintain momentum, sustain pressure, and exploit weaknesses in the enemy's supply and mobility. By the winter of 1944, the narrative had fully shifted. The Sherman, once mocked as a death trap, had proven its value in real-world conditions. It could survive, maneuver, and remain operational where the Panther frequently faltered. American crews had learned to trust their machines and trust each other, turning a lesser tank into a weapon capable of achieving battlefield dominance against technically superior opponents. In the end, the Sherman's greatest victory was not in a duel with a Panther, but in its ability to keep fighting, keep moving, and keep the Allied advance alive. As the Ardennes winter dragged on, the realities of armored warfare became painfully clear for both sides. Panthers, despite their formidable design, were frequently immobilized by mud, ice, and narrow forest paths. American tankers watched as these German superior tanks struggled to reach their objectives, their mechanical complexity proving a liability in harsh conditions. The Sherman, though lighter and less heavily armed, was adapted for the rigors of continuous combat. It could traverse snow-laden roads, muddy trails, and shell-pocked fields with relative ease, allowing its crews to maintain the initiative even under fire. The advantages of reliability were compounded by clever American tactics. Sherman crews learned to avoid head-on engagements with Panthers whenever possible. Instead, they relied on mobility and coordination. Flanking maneuvers, ambushes from forested terrain, and combined attacks with infantry and artillery allowed American units to neutralize Panther advantages without exposing themselves to unnecessary risk. Field reports emphasized a growing realization. Raw firepower alone did not guarantee battlefield dominance. The ability to sustain operations, respond to unforeseen challenges, and adapt quickly often proved decisive. One engagement particularly underscored this reality. A Sherman company faced a small Panther detachment blocking a crucial supply route. Rather than charging directly into the enemy, the American crews used the landscape to their advantage, positioning themselves for enfilade fire while simultaneously coordinating artillery support. The Panthers, hindered by ice and mud, were unable to maneuver effectively. After sustained pressure and accurate fire targeting weak points, both Panthers were immobilized or abandoned. The road was cleared, and American supply lines remained intact. This scenario highlighted a vital lesson. The Sherman's true strength lay in its operational reliability, combined with tactical ingenuity. Psychological factors also played a critical role. American crews developed a strong confidence in their tanks, knowing that mechanical failures were unlikely to take them out of action prematurely. This trust allowed for aggressive maneuvers, quick decision-making, and sustained pressure on the enemy. German crews, in contrast, were constantly aware of their vehicle's fragility. The Panther's complexity demanded meticulous maintenance and constant vigilance, leaving crews hesitant to take risks that could lead to breakdowns or abandonment. In the fog of war, hesitation could be fatal. Moreover, American logistical support amplified the Sherman's advantage. Mechanics could repair damaged tanks quickly, spare parts were plentiful, and replacement vehicles were readily available. German supply chains were overextended, struggling to keep the Panther fleet operational. The combination of robust logistics, field repair capabilities, and dependable vehicles allowed U.S. armored units to maintain momentum, even when facing technically superior opponents. By this stage of the Ardennes campaign, a critical shift in armored warfare doctrine had emerged. Commanders recognized that battlefield effectiveness relied not only on armor and firepower, but on reliability, numbers, mobility, and crew cohesion. The Sherman's perceived weaknesses became its greatest strengths, enabling American tankers to outlast, outmaneuver, and ultimately outfight the Panthers. In practice, it was the dependable, versatile Sherman, not the technically advanced Panther, that dictated the pace and outcome of armored engagements. By late December 1944, the Ardennes had become a proving ground not just for tanks, but for the principles of modern armored warfare. The Sherman, derided as a death trap in the early days of combat, had demonstrated an unexpected combination of reliability, versatility, and resilience. Field commanders increasingly realized that technical superiority alone was insufficient. A Panther, no matter how well armed or armored, could be rendered ineffective if it broke down, ran out of fuel, or became trapped in the harsh terrain of Belgium's forests and snow-covered roads. American tankers leveraged every advantage their Shermans provided. Crews coordinated movements to create overlapping fields of fire, allowing multiple tanks to engage a single Panther while minimizing exposure to the enemy's superior gun. Shermans could maneuver quickly to exploit terrain, take cover behind obstacles, and retreat if necessary without being immobilized. This adaptability turned numbers and mobility into powerful tools, allowing smaller Sherman units to engage larger, more formidable Panther forces and come out victorious. The mechanical dependability of the Sherman was a constant morale booster for crews. Knowing that a minor track break or engine issue could be repaired quickly encouraged aggressive tactics and bold decision-making. In contrast, German Panther crews lived with a constant awareness of their vehicle's fragility. Even when the tank was fully functional, the risk of mechanical failure under stress forced cautious approaches and limited tactical options. Over time, this difference in confidence and flexibility began to show in battle outcomes. A series of skirmishes around Bastogne illustrated this principle clearly. Sherman units, though outgunned in direct confrontations, used flanking maneuvers, feints, and combined arms tactics with infantry and artillery support to neutralize Panther positions. Crews targeted side and rear armor, exploiting mobility limitations, and frequently forced German crews to abandon their tanks when repairs were impossible in the field. These engagements emphasized that operational effectiveness depended as much on reliability and coordination as on firepower and armor. Logistical support further magnified the Sherman's battlefield impact. Spare parts, field mechanics, and repair depots allowed damaged Shermans to return to service quickly, sustaining the tempo of operations. Panthers, with their complex engineering, required extensive repairs that could not always be carried out under frontline conditions. This meant that for every Panther temporarily disabled by combat or terrain, multiple Shermans remained available to continue the offensive. Over time, the attrition of Panthers and the continual availability of Shermans created a decisive strategic advantage. By the end of December 1944, the lessons of the Ardennes were clear. American tankers had transformed the Sherman from a vehicle derided as fragile into a symbol of battlefield endurance. Its success relied not on individual strength, but on a combination of reliability, maneuverability, numbers, crew cohesion, and tactical ingenuity. Panthers, while technically superior on paper, were often outperformed by simpler, more dependable machines. The real battlefield truth was that practical engineering, operational support, and adaptable tactics could consistently triumph over theoretical superiority. The Sherman story in the Ardennes reshaped armored warfare thinking for the remainder of the war. It proved that durability and operational reliability, combined with creative tactics and well-trained crews, could achieve what raw technological superiority alone could not. Sustained effectiveness under the most demanding conditions of combat. As the snow began to melt and the Ardennes campaign drew to a close, the legacy of the Sherman tank was unmistakable. What began as a vehicle derided as a death trap had proven itself not through superior firepower or armor, but through reliability, versatility, and sheer operational endurance. American tankers had learned to trust their machines, to exploit mobility, and to leverage numbers and coordination to achieve battlefield success. The Panthers, brilliant on paper, had repeatedly failed to translate technical superiority into practical results under the harsh realities of combat. The lessons extended beyond individual engagements. Commanders began to understand that a dependable, adaptable tank force with well-trained crews could consistently outmaneuver and outlast technically superior but fragile enemy vehicles. Logistics, repair capabilities, and operational support were as crucial to battlefield effectiveness as armor and guns. Shermans could be repaired quickly, replaced easily, and integrated into large-scale maneuvers, creating a continuous pressure that the Germans could not match. Panthers, with their mechanical complexity, could not maintain the same tempo or availability. By the end of 1944, the Sherman had become a symbol of American armored ingenuity. Its success was not glamorous or flashy. It was earned through practical engineering, battlefield discipline, and unwavering crew confidence. Tankers who once feared the vehicle now depended on it to carry them through the most dangerous engagements, trusting that it would endure where other machines might fail. In the broader context of World War II, the Sherman's performance in the Ardennes offered a vital lesson. Technological superiority alone does not guarantee victory. It is the combination of reliability, adaptability, tactical skill, and operational support that ultimately determines success in combat. The Sherman may have been underestimated, but by the end of the campaign, it had earned its place as one of the most effective and resilient tanks of the war. Its legacy endures as a testament to the principle that practical, dependable machinery, combined with human skill and ingenuity, can triumph over seemingly superior technology.